right, guys, this is Ryan with Veteran Drone Services and BestwayAg, and today we're going to be talking about the controller for the new DJI Agras T50. Exact same controller as the T40, the exact same RM700 RC Plus Pro Plus that we're used to from the DJI Agras T40, same controller as the T50. We do, however, have some user interface changes, all the same controls that we're used to, plus some additional ones. It's just going to take you a little bit of time to determine where they're at because it has been maneuvered around a little bit. So we're going to go through it, kind of give you a sneak peek at where some of that stuff's at. So we are going to click into the DJI Agras app. That Agras app is going to pull up just like it did before. Looks fairly similar. Few key buttons are in a few different places. So here along the bottom, we have the log upload. So if you have a crash, you need to upload a log. That's here on the front screen, very easy to get to. Device management is also a shortcut key here on the bottom. So if we click on our device management page, it's going to pull up all of our different devices, what their firmware versions are, what needs to be updated, and what's already been updated. So if we close back out of that, we go here to our log upload. That's where we're going to upload our general issues, our crashes. We're going to upload our flight logs and that sort of stuff to get our QR codes and so forth with that. Aircraft disconnected, big label down here at the bottom shows us where that's, well, whether we're connected, disconnected, what aircraft we're connected to. And then we got our typical begin button down here in the bottom right hand corner that we can get into our app. Top left, we got our login information, and next to it we have our notifications. Then we've got our settings. Here in our settings, that's where you're going to find your units of measure, your multi-language audio files. If you want to listen to it in something else, you can. Storage management, network diagnosis. That's where we reset our beginner guide if we're training new pilots. And then our real-time flight data transmission is all right there in our general settings. So all nice and easy to get to. Mostly things we're familiar with from our T40. Our little manila folder icon up here in the top, that's going to take us into our fields. It's going to show us what we've got as far as fields go. And that's where we're going to upload and download our fields to and from the cloud if we're sharing those data points. All right, down here in the bottom right corner, we're going to go ahead and click Begin. You're going to notice very first, it looks very familiar to the old T40 controller. Few differences. We'll start up here in the top left corner, and that is going to give us our route mode, our manual mode, our fruit tree mode, our route mapping, and our fruit tree mapping. Big difference you'll notice here is we do not have a manual plus button here. We still have manual plus, it's just a feature. The manual and manual plus features are co-located. So let's go ahead and go into manual. And we go into manual mode, you'll see right here up at the top, it'll give us our manual or manual plus settings. So if we click on the M plus, that's what's going to give us all of our manual plus settings that we're used to having there. Click the M for manual. That's going to give us the less control, more operator or pilot controlled functions without the assistance of the manual plus. So that's a nice feature, way to put that in there and be able to switch back and forth between the two without having to go completely back out. So if we go back into there and we go into our route mode, where we're normally, most of us operate probably, we're going to get in here on the left-hand side. There's our little caret that comes out. That's going to show us all of our fields. That shows us we can switch to fields that we have in progress. We can still search by field name, and we can also go into our distance or time and sort the fields that we have saved in our device by distance or time. So all very familiar stuff to us, just a little bit of different nuances about it. We go over here in the top, along the top here, it shows us the controller. I do like it shows us it's at 87%, it's colored green. It shows us what our internal battery's at. It's kind of nice. It does seem to contrast a little more, so you can visually see when your internal and external batteries powers are getting low. So hopefully that'll help remind some of the pilots to change their external batteries before it runs down. If we go to our gear setting up here in the top right corner, this is where we'll get into some changes. So we'll move this over out of here. And as we look at our aircraft settings, the majority of our settings are all exactly the same. They're just in a little different location. Like before, we had it in aircraft, and then we had to go into the bottom to advanced settings, and it gave us another set of opportunities to make some changes there. Here, it's all kind of just in the aircraft control. So we still have our connection route speed and our altitude. We still have where we can update our home point to where the drone is or where the controller is if we need to update our home point. And then we've got our aircraft responses, they're calling it. That's where, what do you want the aircraft to do when these things happen? When my tank is empty, what do I want it to do? When the task is complete, what do I want it to do? When the RC signal lost, what do I want it to do? We have all the same options, all the same control features. It's just displayed a little different. So instead of a drop-down arrow, we can just click on which one of these we want to select, whether we want it to hover, ascend 3 meters, or return to me. Me personally, I put all these settings at return to me. If something goes wrong while the aircraft is conducting its operations, I want it to stop what it's doing, come back to its home point, and land so we can figure out what's wrong. We also do, new to this one, we didn't before have a chance to tell it to continue operations even when signal was lost, other than on our last set of pre-flight checks before the drone took off. We do now have an option here where we can turn on our continue task on lost signal. Sometimes if it's rolling over that terrain and we know we're going to lose signal, we can tell it to do it. Before, we could only do it for one flight at a time. Here we can turn it on and have it do it for every flight. We still have our spotlight settings down here, so we can still set our headlights on, off, or auto. So now we're going to get into flight optimization. We get into flight optimization. That's where we're going to get into our auto route spacing adjustment. Now they call it smart resume instead of auto efficiency resumption. We just call it smart resume. We've got here, we can turn on our display, our empty tank. We can rectify our calibration point if that's what we need to do. Back out of here and we can go down into flight protection. So if we click on flight protection, that's going to give us our range and unlocking our geo zones and so forth. So we can set our max distance from the controller to the drone, still 6,562 feet, and we can still set our max distance to 328 feet as far as altitude goes. This is where we turn on our attitude mode if we wanted to do that. And this is also where we unlock our geo zone. So flight protection stuff is all easily labeled. It kind of makes sense what's in there. And then we got our sensor calibration. So we click on the sensor calibration, and this is where we will calibrate the sensors of the drone. Not necessarily the spray or spread system, but this is where we calibrate the drone itself. If we need to do an IMU calibration, if we need to calibrate a compass, or if we need to do a gimbal calibration for the camera. All those are right there in our sensor calibration. And then we also have a linking button down here at the bottom, multiple places where we can link the drone to the controller if it's not linked, or if you're using one controller on multiple drones, or multiple controllers on a single drone. However you maybe run your operation, a new place to link that together. So if we go back in here, we'll go into our spray system. Click on our spray system. You'll notice here it says spraying and spreading system is turned on. That's normal, like our T40 was. But here we have sprinkler operating mode. This is where we're going to depict whether we're going to use a 2-sprinkler configuration or a 4-sprinkler configuration. Nice thing about this is when we go forward on a 2-sprinkler configuration, if we were to select the alternate mode, then when we're going forward, the rear sprinklers will spray, and when we're backing up, the forward spray nozzles will spray. So it's always spraying from behind the aircraft in this configuration. Where in full mode, all 4 sprinklers are engaged. When those 4 sprinklers are engaged, that does give us 6.34 gallon per minute flow rate out of the T50, which is double what we had with the T40. And also we know that, from our previous videos, we've talked about the improved pump speed on a 2-nozzle configuration is upgraded now from 3.17 gallons per minute to 4.23 gallons per minute. So we have improved the pumps, improved the ergonomics of the system, which allows us to increase that flow. We get into management and calibration. This is where we can go in here and we get all of our real-time spray data that we're used to getting. So we can see what our centrifugal nozzles are doing. We can see what our pumps 1 and 2 are doing. We can tell what's going on with our pumps and our centrifugal discs in real time, just like we could with the T40. New option here, we have a clean hose. So let's say you're done for the day and you're going to run your clean out and you're going to do your triple rinse to, neutralize your active ingredient in your chemicals, and you're going to just rinse your tank out. Before, most people would just put it on the ground, turn the sprayer system on, and let it spray out the system. Now with the clean hose, you can just click clean hose. Your centrifugal motors don't spin, so your discs aren't spinning, and it's just flushing your system. That'll allow you to flush your system, clean your system out without spraying it all over everywhere. You can just pour it out right there where it's at. So that's a nice feature, one I'll probably try to use quite a bit. Clear trapped air, we're very familiar with that. And then flow meter error alert, everybody's familiar with this. This lets us know if our flow meter is out of tolerance within a certain percentage, it will alert us. Me personally, I like to run mine at 10% because I like to run the tightest tolerances I can. Here's where we select our spinner disc type. So if you're using a single atomization disc or a dual atomization disc, just like on the T40 with the latest firmware we got with 515 and the new firmware 911, both of them allow us to do that. So it's no different here with the T50. Spraying system calibration. So all of our calibration stuff is under one tab. So our flow meter calibration, factory resets, pump calibrations, weight calibrations, weight sensor replacements, all those settings are all in one calibration spot. Pretty nice and clean and easy to get to. I like the way that's set up. We back out of our spray system settings, and that kind of gives us everything and all the control we had with the T40 before, with a couple improvements that I think are just that. They're not just new features, I do believe they are improvements. Next, we'll go into tab 3, our controller. So as we get into our controller, stick mode 2, that's pretty much the industry standard. I don't know why we would change off of stick mode 2, but that is industry standard, is stick mode 2. Here's where we go into our remote controller calibration. It's where we go into our button overview, all very similar and just like the T40 was. And then it comes with the same factory custom default settings for our buttons, and then you can program them to the different things you want to do. If we look here at our, what things we can turn on, our spotlight switch, we can enable or disable our omnidirectional obstacle avoidance. I don't know why you'd want a quick key to that, but if you chose to be able to turn that off at the click of a button, you could. Tilt down or recenter the gimbal, that's one a lot of people use, and that's why it comes as a factory default on your L3 button. But if you wanted to move it, you were able to do that. We do have steer left and right in manual plus mode. We also have U-turn in manual mode. So now you're in manual mode, you can just U-turn it right around. And then you can add a point, you can set your A-B route, you can set your A point and your B point, either one. You can expand or collapse your task settings. So there are some improvements and some new functions in our buttons that we can pre-program. They'll clear the flight route. Sometimes your screen gets messy with if you have a long ferry between your home point where you're going to start spraying or the field you're going to, we can now program this to clean those up a little easier. And we can create a shortcut to our start hose cleaning. Enable and disable our altitude stabilization. So there are some new improvements on the options you have for pre-programming your shortcut keys. Going on to our sensor settings. So omnidirectional obstacle avoidance. Obviously here we're not connected to an aircraft. Those are turned off, but we still have the same control there. And then we get into our scenario, they call it. So before they called it terrain, and now we call it scenario. What scenario are you in? Are you in flatland or mountain or hilly orchards or above water? So if you're doing some aquatic spraying and you're going to be above water, before there was some issues people were having with the radar detecting the top of the water, we now have an over the water setting in here. Also before, mountain mode kind of did some weird stuff for us sometimes. The mountain mode hilly orchards setting works really well with the T50 on rolling hills, terrain follow stuff. So a lot of the issues we had with the T40 that we now think we've cleared up with the new firmware updates, the T50 comes standard with those options. So it's not just mountainous mode, it's hilly, rolling hills, that sort of stuff is vastly improved with the T50. Not only a button that's doing it, but really the big factor is, like we talked about in previous videos, with the dual binocular sensor, one upward and one downward, and then the two big omnidirectional radars is really what's improved that. But it's nice to have a button here that we can click on and negotiate those rolling hills that have kind of given us some issues at time to time with the T40. Altitude stabilization, that's a new one. It says aircraft follows terrain automatically and adjusts altitude during flight based on a set height above crops. We were able to keep it within 1 foot of deviation with that turned on, which is a vast improvement to nearly any drone on the market. So it's good to see that they're listening to you guys, the end users, and taking your inputs and implementing into their programming. Obstacle bypassing. So obstacle bypassing would only work at 23 feet before. Now it does work at a faster rate, and it does tell us here that avoid using it, rainy weather, no difference in when to use it, when not to use it, but it does allow us to use obstacle bypassing at a faster speed now, and that is solely based on the fact that the dual binocular vision and dual omnidirectional radars. When we get into our advanced settings on our sensors down here at the bottom of this screen, that's where we're going to get into our radar sensitivity, our side braking distance, and enhanced obstacle avoidance. The enhanced obstacle avoidance is another new one, and this increases the aircraft's ability to see smaller objects. So whether it is power lines, tiny twigs along the field edge, the enhanced obstacle avoidance does allow a little more sensitivity, I would say, to what it's going to pick up. Moving on down to RTK. So RTK just has on-off. And then in our RTK stuff here, we do have a drop-down where we can go custom RTK network or the DRTK2 base station. Before, we had those two options and none. Now, instead of a none, we just turn our RTK positioning off, and we no longer have to deal with a none tab in there. So if it's off, and you don't have to worry about it. We get down in here into our battery. Same data we had before. Again, like our what to do when we run out of liquid or low on battery. Here's where we put all those to return to home or whatever you want it to do. Again, the tabs are different, so instead of a drop-down selection, it's both tabs side by side there, so you know to click on them. Had some people didn't realize that the drop-down was a drop-down and they could choose it. So it's nice that it's both displayed right there and you know that you have options. And that, pretty well everything else is very similar in what the controls are for the battery settings in here. We go down here to our HD. This is where it gives us basically a spectrum analyzer, if you will, that's detecting what frequencies are going on in the area we're operating in. Generally, we see fluctuations in this when we're operating around, distribution power lines or your big tall power lines out in the middle of big fields, or if you're around cell towers, that's usually when we're having some interference issues. This is where it's going to, auto is where we recommend you guys leave it, and it will choose whether it wants to be on 2.4 gigahertz or 5.8 gigahertz, and it allows it to select the best channel for image transmission, which should be vastly improved on the new T50 due to, like we talked about in those previous videos, having the antennas on the front tucked inside and then also having another set on the aft of the aircraft. So regardless of which way the drone is coming to you or flying away, you are going to have direct line to those antennas. So there's the difference in some settings. A lot of similarities. I think the majority of the changes they made have been improvements and not just random changes. And I think that's based on the feedback from the end users. So if you're one of our customers or not one of our customers, it doesn't matter. Please continue to give your feedback, because we push all that stuff to DJI, and we can see in the T50 and with the new firmware updates on the T40 that they are listening to the end user input. So it's nice to see we got a manufacturer that listens to their end users and makes the necessary changes. So please keep giving us that feedback, and we'll continue to push it forward for you guys. We get down here into to putting in a new field. So if we were to put in a new field here, we're going to select add just like we did before. We're going to go ahead and
low accuracy.
We're going to go ahead and
Actual flight route
turn her down just a little bit. All right. So pretty much the same points. We got the same control. It's just laid out a little different. It looks a little different, but it's all still there. We still can put in our non-spraying area. We can still put in our round obstacles. We can still put in our polygon-shaped obstacles. And of course, our polygon-shaped field. We can hit our arrows drop down. It still lets us put in points with the controller, with the aircraft, or with the crosshairs. But you'll see over here on the left, it's going to go ahead and give us now, while we're building the field, we also have route spacing control, and we also have widen our overall margins. And if we want to change our start point, we can do that here. In our basic settings, on the right hand here, we got our advanced settings. So if we go into that, that's where we set up that we do the field only, the boundary and the field, or the boundary only. So that's something new to with the T50 now, is we can do just a boundary route. So before, we would have to take the same field, route segment, slide it all the way over so that it was just the boundary, then save it as, don't overwrite the original. Now we have two files. Now when we're setting this up, we can tell it right now. If we just want a boundary route, we can just do a boundary route of this field without those extra steps. If we want boundary and route, or auto boundary route, we can select that, or we can do it without it. Same controls we had mainly, except it's much quicker and easier to get to based on your guys' feedback. You got the course angle adjustment that you can do, and you got your route segmentation. So all still the same type of controls. I just like having it there while I'm building the field, because I feel like I have all the controls in my hand and I don't have to save and then go back and make some changes. So it seems to be a little bit easier, but we'll see. You know, maybe we don't use them as much as we think we are. Maybe it's nice to have, but we're going to retort back to our old ways. We'll see which way kind of works best for us. But we are still able to go ahead and map out the field here real quick. We can map out a field and just give us a couple points here so we can see what it's going to do. Still have to maintain the direction of clockwise or counterclockwise. And if we go back and try to put a point here in the mid side, we add that one, it's going to mess up our field. So it still doesn't allow us to go back and put a point in the middle. But as we are building the field and mapping it out, similar to how it does in the mapping mode, that as you're building the field, it goes ahead and puts your flight plan in there. Now it does it on your spraying as well. And that's why having your control here, when you're done building the field, all your parameters are all set at one time and you save that whole operation or that whole mission. So that's kind of nice. Still have our same control with our auto optimization turned on by default, which is nice. Before it was off by default, now it's on by default. So it should help us get to the most efficient flight plan a little more quickly. We can still drag it around and move our flight plan to wherever we want. And we can also still double click on a field edge and automatically pick a field edge that we want to parallel off of and then move from there. So all those same features we got with the T40, we still have those with the T50 here as well. Once we've got all that set up and we want to save it, we kind of have the same control here. So now we'll go ahead and save that. And it doesn't give us an option for anything else. So once we back out of this, so once we say we're going to cancel it, we're not going to use it, when we click on it to highlight it, it shows us our flight route. Before it didn't used to do that. Now when we click on it, it shows that flight route in there. And then when we say we're going to use it, it pulls up the same parameters we're used to as before. We can select our gallon per minute. So we got it set for the 4 nozzle configuration. So we should be able to change this to, let's say we're going to go 5 gallon to the acre. And then we're going to see down here that our flight speed, we're going to pick that up and we're going to do, let's say 32 feet per second. Oh, that's because let's change our height above crop here, because notice it wouldn't let us do it. So now we're going to change our height above crop. And let's put that up to 12 feet per second. And let's put our route spacing up as well. We'll say put that at 28 feet. Or we'll put that at, see if it'll let us put it at 30 feet. All right, so now we're 12 foot above the crop. It slowed our flight spacing down. But you can see it's still slowing us down and not letting us go above that. So if we go back over here to our spray system, and we go back up here and we select, oh, it's not going to let us select it. See, it won't let us select full flight mode unless we are connected to the aircraft. So there are still some things that we have to be connected to the aircraft before we can make those adjustments. So just wanted you guys to see that if it's telling you you can't do something or you can't do certain parameters, or it's not letting currently, as you can see here, it won't let our pumps go faster than 4.2 gallon per minute. Like we talked about, they max out in 2 nozzle configuration at 4.23 gallons per minute. If that's what we were on the last time the drone and the aircraft was connected, which we were, it won't let us go beyond that. We'll have to reconnect to the aircraft with the new configuration to select 4 nozzle configuration so that we can increase our pump flow. So just wanted you guys to see some of the variations that we do have and still have to do certain things in switching between a 2 nozzle configuration and a 4 nozzle configuration. And if I just said 4 pump, I meant 4 nozzle. So it doesn't have 4 pumps, it just has 4 nozzles. So those are same settings we're used to. If we were connected to the aircraft and outside in the field ready to go, start would not be grayed out and we'd be able to go ahead and start from here. So those are the basic nuances and changes and similarities between the DJI Agras T40 and the DJI Agras T50 controller.